Keep it simple. The simple works. You know, we're dealing with adult learners. We're not dealing with children, right? So
that they're being overtrained and in the areas that don't really pertain to their job. Because you're going to be sitting there looking crazy. Welcome back to Sustain Train. We are your trainer experts. I'm Alfred.
I'm Xavier.
And we're here to just dive deeper this time into training development. Take it a little bit deeper than we did on part one last time. So grab your headphones, be prepared to, write down some notes. Take these gems in, man, whether you're a training developer, a training lead, a project manager, or just looking to learn more about SAP, this is for you. So let's get started. Xavier, when it comes to training development, being a training developer, one of the last things you want to hear is a site manager come to you and say, hey, my people are coming and they're complaining that they're being overtrained and in the areas that don't really pertain to their job. Because you're going to be sitting there looking crazy. You don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So to, be proactive and not go down that route, what are some of the things that we should consider when it comes to roles and responsibilities and catering our training to specific roles?
Yeah, I like that, man. And you hit the nail on the head because that will happen and you will be looking crazy. But the way you combat that is from the very beginning, you want to gather a list of all employees that will be trained. Now, I know this sounds simple and plain, but you will be surprised at how many organizations overlook that, right? So don't just take that list and, okay, I know who I'm training. No, go sit with who provided you that list. Let's go through this list. Okay, this person works in customer service. This person works in production. This person is a warehouse worker. He pulls orders. He packs the shipments, things like that. So why isn't this person in training? Oh, they don't perform any of these functions. And then you begin your training and that person is nowhere to be found, but you come to find out that they actually do operate under customer service rules and do some of the same functionality. Right. But this manager didn't know because they're not in the know, right? So that sounds simple to gather a list of employees that'll be trained, but go through that list because some of those people some of the end users that are going through the process, they may work in transportation. But on Sundays, when nobody else is in the office, they have to do everything. Right. They have to process the order. They have to send that order over to production, right? And they're still working transportation. So they actually do need training in the SD module versus no training at all. So you want to identify all of those employees and gather that list. Then from that list, identify their roles, like the roles that are being considered. This person is a customer service manager. This person is a warehouse manager. This person is a production manager. Oh, we have a warehouse worker, a general warehouse worker. We have a customer service rep. We have a production planning associate, whatever it is. Not only just gathering the list of people, but identifying their roles because that allows you to assign a role to each one of those end users, right? Because you can go into Fiori, you have the tags in there that says customer service rep, and you can add in certain tiles and certain apps that are specific to their job function. Right. But without that, how would you know? So get that list, identify the roles, and now you're able to assign those business process roles to an SAP user role in Fiori, right? And that alleviates a lot of stress. It keeps things streamlined. It keeps it clean. It doesn't confuse the end user. As a matter of fact, it makes their job easier because now they don't have to remember, okay, what tile do I go into to do a list of sales or to create a sales order report? It's under that role that you already assigned. Right. And sometimes if you haven't set up a homepage or your favorites, which we all know you can do, right? You can set up your favorites and you can have your step-by-step process aligned with the tiles going from 1 to 10 or however many functions you have. But it's much easier and more simple to just assign that role within SAP. From there, we've mastered everything from gathering the list. We know what their role is from a business standpoint. Now we've assigned that role within, from an SAP functionality standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Now we want to build out our course, right?
Right.
Our course offering, I guess I should say. So when you're building out your course offering, you want to assign roles for each lesson in your curriculum. So let's take, for example, on the SD side, which is interchangeable. We say order to cash, right?
Right.
So if I have already assigned these roles for each person in my customer service department, from the customer service manager to the accounts receivable clerk, I am going to build my lessons out or my curriculum based off of that. So I may have OTC 101, and that's strictly concerning sales order management. Okay, sales orders come in, whether that's EDI or whatever the case is, and we're analyzing those sales orders and processing them. Then I may have OTC 102, which is going over the delivery process. Right. So forth and so on. Production planning 101, that may explain at a high level the MRP process that generates the production orders based off of what inventory you currently have, things of that nature. So it just keeps things clean. It keeps things streamlined. It gives you all the information that you need, and it sets up the environment that's actually way more conducive for the end user. Again, this is not a situation where it's not McDonald's, it's not Burger King. You can't just have it your way. The customer is not always right? But you approach that end user as if the customer is always right. Right. The end users are what makes the company move. So treat them accordingly and garner all the information that you can to make their transformation a success.
Hey, I get it, man. That's great insight. I like to say that, we want to consider the workload of each person that we're going to be training, because it's easy to know if, somebody wears multiple hats. Maybe everybody wears multiple hats, right? Then you got to train them on everything. It's just nowhere around it because they have a smaller location. That's just how it is. But for larger locations where we're training more people, I like to take an approach of, okay, what's your primary role on a daily basis? Okay, now what's your secondary role on a daily basis? All right, so what we're gonna do is the first half of training, let's just say, to keep it simple, there's 4 weeks of training. Yeah. For the first 2 weeks, we're gonna teach you end to end. You're gonna learn the whole process, end to end, what everybody does. Let's just take the picking role, for instance, when it comes to warehouse management, EWM, right? You may have somebody that's reviewing the waves and how to release the wave. Right. And then you also have to, after doing that, now assign warehouse orders to different folks or tell them what queues. So just managing how the work is rolled off to the pickers, right? Then you have the pickers that have to go into the RF environment and do all the picking, going to the source bins, picking the items, taking them to the staging lane or wherever they must go as far as the destination bin is concerned. Right. And then from there, you may have some packing that has to be done. And after packing, you may have to load the pallets onto the truck and then process goods issue, unless you have, transportation units involved as well. So as I'm explaining this, that just shows you there's a lot of steps in the outbound process. Right. And so maybe the first 2 weeks, we train to the outbound supervisors end to end on everything, right? Then we bring the pickers in. Of course, they're just going to learn the picker role. We're not even going to introduce them to the GUI, right? We're not going to put them on computers. We're going to take you into the RF environment and let you learn strictly that. Right. But back to those supervisors that play multiple roles when it comes to releasing waves, understanding transportation management, understanding managing the pickers, understanding the loading and packing and all these different aspects. That can be overwhelming for one person to learn all these things to be held accountable. Definitely. But like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to teach you end to end for the first 2 weeks. But these last 2 weeks, we're going to go back to that list and say, okay, what was your primary role? Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make Johnny primary at this role. Then we're going to make Sarah primary at that role. Yeah. And, somebody else primary at another role. That way they can just hone in on those silo areas of that process become great at that, and even to the point where we can teach you basic troubleshooting in that area. For one, that makes that person feels a lot more responsible. That they have to hold down this pillar within the process to make sure we go live and they're successful. Because that's the whole idea. We want them to be able to go live under their primary role. And then after they go live, after some weeks down the road, then let's promote cross-training at that point. That way, people feel more successful, going to this new system. It can be daunting for these new users. You want to just set them up for success. Understand that, there's going to be some pushback. And so we try to eliminate that by doing these little things like that to make them feel better about their learning experience.
Right. So
you want to set up your training, so forth, so that they can take on that approach. Considering these role-specific insights before training development and training facilitation. All right. Also, there's a lot of companies that use SAP in different ways.
Definitely.
So you just want to consider some of the differences from industry to industry, even company to company, so that your training is relatable. There's going to be some times where you can utilize some training insight from a previous client to apply it to this new one. But some cases, it's going to be a whole lot different. And just considering those role differences, maybe the last site you trained from a warehouse perspective, it was just very standard. Now this new warehouse that you're training, it's a lot more that goes into the processes. Maybe they have batch management, maybe they have, batch management, lots. They have international shipments, so they have to capture country of origin. It's a lot of different things that can be considered from one site to the next from these roles perspective. So consider these different workloads and these locations, and that's going to take you further when it comes to developing your training content.
Definitely. Is your organization still using ECC?
And if so, why are you still using ECC? You know that deadline's approaching, and SAP is not playing. They are not going to support you. That's why we want to tell you more about Pathways, your roadmap to sustainment. Change management, check. Training development, check. Training facilitation, check. Hypercare support, check.
Sustainment,
check.
Contact Altech Consulting today. We don't just train,
we sustain.
So yeah, that was great information, man. We all know that no one site is the same as the next site, and all companies are going to use SAP differently. So you're going to have some custom things going on, and everything is not just going to be standard from one project to the next project. When it comes to your curriculum outline and designing that from in the training resources, what are some of the key components for designing that curriculum?
Right. You touched on this a little bit earlier when it comes to roles and responsibilities. You kind of used the sales and distribution example. Right. You definitely want to have a course catalog in place. That's going to list the different lessons that must be taught for these different departments, right? After you have your course catalog built out, you definitely want to now build out the details of your curriculum from each lesson to lesson. Understand who's the trainer. Who's the target audience? What's the estimated length of this training? That way, that's something that the managers really want to know so that they can be prepared on how long their end users are going to be in training. Because their employees still have a day job, right?
They got a job to do.
Operations got to keep going even though you're training. So them being prepared and knowing how long they're going to be in training is important. You also want to include, a section for quizzes, teachbacks. And I like to say, even though quizzes are absolutely a must, you don't want to just lean on quizzes only. You also want to lean on performance in the system. So on one project, we built out a performance assessment for these end users. So you want to go ahead and make sure that's part of your curriculum as well, and just part of your planning to make sure you have a performance assessment that will track how your end users are doing. this is another gem. Like, this is a secret, man. I really don't even want to share this because
maybe you should give it to him. But hey, if you want to give it to him, go on, give it to him, man. Give it to him.
Yeah. So that's helped us out a lot, having a performance-based assessment. Everybody thinks that quizzes, if you pass a quiz, then you're going to understand it. But that's not the case. Some people are just good at taking tests.
Yeah.
Right? Remembering answers to the questions. But when it comes to training in a system like SAP that's very complex, the performance is what really matters. So building out a performance assessment that is going to track, all right, week 1, what was the assessment? All right, we're going to just be fair. Nobody really stepped up to another level. It was a lot of foundational learning.
Right.
All right. Maybe week 2, now on the scale of 1 to 5, all right, some people moved up to
moving the needle
2,
a little
right?
bit. Yeah.
Maybe some people stayed at 1. Maybe some people went all the way up to 3. They just getting it.
Yeah.
Right. And so by the time we get to the end of training, and the project manager and the business and IT team, we're going to a go, no-go call, right? To see if we can be successful at go live. Are we ready for this?
Right.
You want to be confident when you go to that call and say, our people are ready.
Yeah.
We have this performance assessment and the quizzes to prove that our folks are ready for go live.
Definitely.
So on top of that, also just having a space on your curriculums for a day in a life, have a space for that and plan for the people, right? You want to make sure you set up day in the life. Don't just have the functional consultants, the only ones planning day in the life. Of course, you may want them to build out the data for it, but maybe your team has a testing squad for all this all together.
Right.
But as a trainer, you don't want to just sit back and let day in the life happen, because you got to show that the people that you train can perform.
Yeah.
So be hands-on, be their cheerleader, because now it's their time to show that, what Alfred or Xavier had trained is sticking, and they're able to, give good feedback. You can't go in a day in the life without getting that foundational training, because you can't even tell the project leads, oh, this works for us or it doesn't.
Right.
So you got to have that foundational learning so that you can be an asset and provide that good feedback. Because at the end of the day, we want to go live. Yeah. We want to be successful. Yeah. That's what the client needs, and that's what they want.
That's all it's about. The client being successful. And day in the life, it's critical. It's critical. I'm going to say this to y'all. Day in the life is a reflection on you as a trainer. Point blank, period. If they cannot perform a day in the life at a high level, you didn't do your job.
Right.
You showed up.
Right.
But you didn't improve retention. By the end of my training, if my end users cannot perform a day in the life at a high level, I have failed them as a trainer.
Right.
And I can't put it any other way than that. Just from based off of my experience. I would not feel well if day in the life was a failure.
Right.
Because that's me looking in the mirror. Well, dang, what could I have done differently? I must not brought anything to the table that was efficient enough for them to be able to perform. But just to go a little further, when it comes to, building out your curriculum and your outline, just keep it simple, man. You don't have to overcomplicate these things. So I like to, different organizations like different things. Some want user manuals. Me personally, I don't want to deal with a user manual. I just don't. I'm not finna hand over a 30-page document on order management and say, this is your user manual. Right. Now, of course, I'm still going to train them, right? We're still going through the training week after week. But to train from a user manual,
that's insane.
That's a little. It's backtracking a little bit. Yeah. However, if you use that user manual as simply a reference tool, then you may have something. But those are some of the, things that come into the design of the curriculum. If you wanted to build out, user manuals and things like that, but don't consider that user manual the holy grail or the Bible for your training facilitation. Right. All right. going from there, I like to typically use QRGs, quick reference guides. That's going to give them a step-by-step process or a step-by-step map for a specific process. So let's just say create a sales order. Well, that QRG is going to be a 1 to 2 page document that shows and explains to them step-by-step what they're doing in order to create that.
Simple.
It's gonna stick. They're gonna retain it. Also reinforce it with simulations. So that's your enable now. That's your skillful. Build out these processes in your simulation so that they can always revert back to it, and you can actually utilize it in your facilitation in some aspects. But being hands-on learners and things of that nature, a simulation is going to go far. Just like a QRG, something that they can keep at their desk and quickly pull out to remember a step in the process that they may have overlooked or may have forgotten. In addition, you can have your SOPs, standard operating procedures.
Right.
Do not go overboard with this. Please. We've seen it, right?
Yes.
Do not go overboard with an SOP.
Yes.
An SOP is strictly a tool for a process. It's not giving you the entire process, standard operating procedure. You're going to go this. Give them a small breakdown of the process. That's your SOP. Your SOP is not meant to be your curriculum guide, right?
Yeah.
It's meant to enforce the process for a new hire or somebody cross-training.
Right.
For instance.
Right, exactly.
They can go in and look at an SOP for performing a cycle count. Maybe they come from the production side and they're, they don't perform cycle counts, but now they're going to the warehouse side and they're being tasked with that. So that's what that's for. Alfred mentioned, the quizzes and things like that. You can have quizzes, whether that's throughout utilizing your simulation, but I like to do gamification.
Right. That's engaging.
Again, we know we're dealing with adult learners, but when I say gamification, I'm talking about quizzes where we're making it competitive. Because even though you're dealing with adults, and I say gamification, competitiveness lives across the board. I want to beat Alfred. Alfred wants to beat me. So when they step in that classroom,
make it fun.
They are trying to beat the other employee. So that increases your retention. Gamifying the whether that's a quiz, it could be a 10-question quiz over processes that we discussed the previous day or the previous week. But there's also a segue into making sure that they retain what you spoke on the previous week. Hey, we talked about this last week, but before we go into our new subject or our new topic, let's play this game based off of last week. Now, everything that you trained last week, you brought back to the forefront before you move forward with the next issue. So you made it a point that, hey, before we move to the next topic, I want to see if you mastered this topic. And that's how you lead to what we spoke on previously about day in the life, because they already understand the processes. And last but not least, when it comes to your curriculum, I'm not going to give y'all an example of this. I'm just going to say, you can't train without data.
You can't.
Can you train without data, bro?
You cannot.
You can go in there with PowerPoints. You can go in there with user manuals. You can go in there with QRGs. You can't train without data. I can go talk to my kids until I'm blue in the face about an SAP process and talk to them. They're going to look at me like my daddy crazy. What is he talking about? You have to have that data built out, man. So I like to have training data worksheets. So I may come in the classroom the next day and provide a handout that may have multiple orders that I've placed on there. Okay, well, I'm calling from, one of their customers, right? This store, I want 5 lawn chairs, 300 cases of rubber bands, and 5 cameras.
Right.
You know, I'm gonna give them the quantity, I'm gonna give them the ship to, I'm gonna give them all of that. But I'm gonna keep some things to myself.
Right.
And see if they figure it out. Hey, I want you to create an order for this.
Yeah, they make them think.
Make them think. Reinforcement.
Right.
But if I'm just going in and I'm talking about it, what are they learning? So build out your training data worksheets. Okay, we're gonna do partial confirmations versus full confirmations. I'm gonna give them a production order on this paper. Multiple production orders. Go in and perform. The end of the day, we're wrapping up.
Right.
Go in and perform a confirmation. I'm not telling them whether it's a partial or a final. But when they go in the system and they see, oh, 293 have already been confirmed against 2,000. So that previous one was a partial. This must be the final.
Right. Right.
That's training. You can't train without data. So make sure that you haven't, keep it simple, of course. You can utilize your user manuals, utilize your QRGs, your simulations, provide some gamification, and always, always, always have some training data worksheets.
Yes, sir. All this is great when it comes to, planning your training development and just getting things created and being creative with your training development content, right? That way that the training facilitation, the way that the trainers receive this information, they get in the way that it makes it fun.
Right.
I know we kind of talk a little bit ahead of ourselves when we're talking about training development. We kind of get into the facilitation side of things a little bit. Because we're excited about all of it, right? But nothing's more exciting for a site manager than hearing their team in training loud, rowdy, excited about learning.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I promise you, that's going to take you a long way. They don't even have to come and ask you if they're learning or if they're happy or they're excited. They hear it outside the room. Like, what are they doing in there? They're going crazy. They're having fun learning SAP, and it's possible to do so.
Yep.
We went to one client. Actually, you went to that one this time, maybe a couple weeks ago. They just wanted a simple onboarding training. So like high level SAP overview for their new hires.
Right.
It wasn't a full shebang type of training for this particular client.
Right.
You talked about how excited that room was. And this one girl, she was like on it. She won like 3 Starbucks gift cards. 3
Starbucks. I incorporated 3 quizzes.
Yeah.
And she was the first to complete all 3 quizzes, but I also had an incentive, the Starbucks gift card. Right. $10 a piece. She got all 3. All 3. And they were engaged from start to finish strictly because of those quizzes.
Right. So you can make it fun. It's definitely needed because it can be boring learning a new system. It's not just SAP, it's any system. So it's the trainer that makes it fun, keeps it spiced up, and engaging.
Right.
As we move on to the next topic, it's like, how do we ensure that the training environment is ready for facilitation? How are we prepared going in? Of course, you say the data needs to be prepared and all that good stuff. How do we just make sure that we set up for success with this training environment?
Yeah, man. I mean, when it comes to the training environment, you got to start with the users, right? So you need to make sure that we've already gathered that list, right? We've already mapped out the roles. We need to make sure we request access for each and every one of those users. Right. Nobody left out. We need to request that early on.
Right.
When this project begins and we've identified who's being trained, request access for all end users into that training environment or whatever environment that we're going to be using.
Right.
Don't stop there. Because you can put that request in. That doesn't mean it's coming right back, right? We know that. Right. But once you get that back, hey, okay, we got them in the system. Test those usernames. Test those passwords. Please do not wait. You don't want to wait till the day of training and then you're expecting, this person has a training laptop, this person has a training laptop, and they can't get in. Hey, Alfred, I can't get in. Now, not only has class been disrupted, but class might not even happen. And that's
a login day.
Exactly. This is going to be a login day. Now you got to go through the whole system and make sure everybody can log in. You look up, they got to get back to work.
Right.
So you've lost an entire day of training, which can equate to sometimes 1.5 to 2.5 hours, depending on what you're training, right?
Right.
So always test those usernames and those passwords. Once you've gotten everybody in the system, I mean, even with testing those usernames and passwords, I'd rather keep that in-house with me so that they don't get locked out either.
Right.
I can control resetting a password or identifying that laptop to a specific username and password. Hey, this is your training laptop. Nobody else is getting it. But you may have multiple classes. So you want to make sure that you let them know, hey, this is your training laptop in this class, and this is your training laptop in this class with the username and the password stays the same. Because you don't want people getting locked out. And if they do, you want to be able to rectify that situation immediately. Once you have all of that set up, go into SAP, test all the apps that they're supposed to have access to based off of their user role that we set up, right? Do they have access to general outbound delivery lists? Hey guys, can you search this app? What happens when you click on it? Oh, it's showing me a screen that has a date and all these blocks. Okay, you're in.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's saying I don't have access. That's another person. Okay, well, we need to make sure we go ahead and get with IT and add that into your user profile. Right. So, but you wouldn't know that if you don't test that.
Exactly.
And then the day of training, you're trying to take them through the end-to-end process and they can't even go into the apps that you're going into. So you want to avoid that at all costs by testing that accessibility. I'm saying this almost last, but this is the most important.
Say it.
Test the process, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Test the process, bro. How are you going to just rely on the system working? Oh, man, all right. I flew into Jersey. I'm finna train tomorrow. I got my data credit. I got my data ready. I'm going to start at 7 a.m. You pull up that screen and, man, hold on. What happened? I can't even, this ain't even extended to this warehouse. I can't even put this material in.
Yeah.
Did you test it? Well, those are the things that happen, man. So test the processes, go in there, create a sales order. You have the material list from the client, right? Of what you're building your data with. Dump them all in. Right. See if all of them are extended to all their warehouses, all of their sales organizations, things like that. Go in and perform a cycle count. Test RF environment. Yeah. Make sure that the user can get in. Like anything that you're about to train, test it. You know that. I know that. Now you know that. Test the process, man. And then on top of that, double check your work. Right. I know that may be hard to do. If I'm literally telling people to test the process, who gonna double check it? Right. Like, bro, you said test the process. You didn't say I gotta double check the process. Nah.
You gotta be thorough, man.
You gotta be thorough, man. They paying you. Yes. This is their bottom line you affecting. Yeah. So double check your work. I'm gonna take it back to when do they usually introduce multiplication like third, fourth grade, right? So they give you that math test on Friday, multiplication. And they have 20, maybe 10 questions. No, it's usually 10 questions on that paper. And it's a multiplication thing. So you got 1 row, you got 2 row, 3 row, 4 row, 4 rows of 5. Yeah. Me? I know my multiplication. I'm gravy, right? 2 times 6 is 12. 12 times 12 is 144. Whatever the case is. So I'm only concerned about being the first one to finish. Yeah. I know this. I'm going to be first. That's going to make me the man. And that's what I really was, to be honest. If y'all know me, y'all know that. But it's been times that, I finish and I'm looking around, ain't nobody can finish yet. Miss Hutchinson, I'm done. Oh, great job, Xavier. And then we graded right there and everybody got 100 and I got an 80. Yeah. Hold on, how I get an 80? I was the first one to finish. And I look at it and I done missed 6 times 3. 6 times 3, 20. I know that. No, I know 6 times 3 is 18. Well, how do I have 24? Yeah. Because the question next to it was 24 and I didn't double check my work. But if I would have double checked my work, I probably still would have finished first and got 100. So I know that's a funny story or metaphor, however you want to look at it. double check your work, because it's not, I'll say this seriously. Their success is dependent upon you as a trainer. Take it seriously, man. Double check your work.
Exactly. Hey, you putting in, man. You in your bag on that one for sure. Double check your work. And going back, diving a little deeper to something you just talked about a little earlier, you're just talking about the logging in and making sure they can actually access the training environment.
Right.
You know, because sometimes if you don't log in after a couple of days, it automatically locks you out.
Right, and resets your password.
Exactly. You never did your initial password in the system, right? Or it could be maybe the IT team missed a step.
Yeah, that happens.
That's another thing, right? A lot of times you go from one company to another company and getting through that firewall to get people's access all set up. There's a lot of things that go into it that us as trainers may not even know, you know, but you learn each time you go to a new customer that, okay, if you got training laptops, maybe these laptops or these users need Wi-Fi access.
Yep.
You know, maybe these users need Fiori access.
Yep.
Not just the GUI. Right. Mm-hmm. So even with GUI, you want to make sure that within the connections, the actual server connection is already set up in there, ready to go. Right. Especially if you have single sign-on, it's already trying to make it easier for the end users to get in.
Right.
But if single sign-on as well is not set up, there's a lot of things that have to be considered and could be missed by the IT team because they never had an SAP rollout and having to give these people access to SAP. So this is all new for everybody, right? So you want to be able to be prepared, be proactive, request for the access, as you mentioned, have them logged in a timely manner so that they can reset their password and be confident once we get to training, they're going to be able to log in and get their hands-on experience in this new system. You know, we don't want to waste their time. Take them off the floor of the warehouse or taking them from the office. Yep. They have work to do that need to be done. So when they come to training, we want to make sure that we respect them and their time.
Right.
And that's going to make us look better with their managers as well, that they're coming in and actually learning, not sitting around waiting for each person to log into the system. That's a total waste of time, especially if you already built out the training schedule.
Yep.
So that's another thing with the training schedule. When you're building it out, you might want to just buffer one day just for a login, just to make sure we don't miss anything before we bring them in for real training.
Exactly.
So that's one thing that we do as well. You know, you mentioned about the training data sets and testing and being prepared. This is all part of training development, things you want to consider. You know, it's a lot of unknowns.
Right.
And a lot of times you're going to have these questions that you ask because you have the experience to do so. But it's going to be some new things you run into that you weren't prepared for. Yep. So just, you know, put in that space, that time in your calendar, you know, to go ahead and provide and handle these different issues up front. Just makes you more prepared in the long run for facilitation.
Right.
So that's what we like to promote, just being prepared.
Thank you guys for joining this episode of Sustain Train. Today we discussed roles and responsibilities, curriculum design and training resources, ensuring success with training systems and training environments. Next time, we'll be discussing training facilitation. So until then, stay inspired, stay empowered, and stay on track with Sustain Train.